Welcome to Reclaim, a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter. I am your host, Thais Sky, international speaker, teacher, and a certified life coach currently working to become a licensed psychotherapist in the state of California. Join me here every week as I offer thoughts and interviews on what it means to reclaim your humanness in this messy world. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reclaim the podcast. I am your host, Thais Sky. I am here with a really beautiful interview that I just recorded with Kaitlin June. This is a really incredible conversation about the marriage between music and spirituality and what it means to reconnect to ourselves and reconnect to God. I really enjoyed this conversation, and it's different than any conversation I've had before on Reclaim. So I'm really excited to dive into it and to hear your thoughts. If you don't follow me on Instagram yet, you can find me at I am Thais Sky. Let me know what you think of this conversation, because it was really, really rich for me. And I'm hoping that it will be very rich for you too. But before I get into this interview, I just want to name that something really exciting is coming. Two things actually really exciting is coming. First thing is I've been working really hard on an ebook for you all about navigating the worthiness wound. This is the first time that I will have put all in one place all of the big concepts that I want everyone to know about navigating and tending to and healing the worthiness wound. Really, really excited about this ebook. It will be available for free on my website. And you can go to the show notes to get on the list in order to get the ebook when it comes out. I am starting a wait list. I'm excited about this because this will give me a clear idea if this concept, if the idea of the worthiness wound needs to be turned into a full-fledged book. I've been thinking about writing a book for a long time. It still doesn't quite feel like the right time. I'm imagining it's probably going to feel more like the right time in 2022, but creating this ebook, putting all these concepts together, I don't know. I'm just really excited at the prospect of the potentiality of writing a full-on book. So that means I need your feedback. I need you to tell me what you want, and if this book feels like a really good thing that you are going to want. Okay, so how do you support that? Well, go sign up for this ebook, and once it comes out, let me know your thoughts, okay? So go to the show notes, sign up for the ebook. It will be coming out soon. Second thing I'm really excited to be mentioning is that I am going to be I have created a brand new offering. This is the first new offering that I've created since before I started grad school in 2018, March of 2018. So pretty much all of 2018. So really I haven't created anything new because Worthy Women Rise isn't new. I've done that for a few years since I created Worthy Women Rise. It's been a long time. Really excited about this new offering, and it's going to be for coaches, healers, teachers who want to deepen their capacity to do one-on-one work. I've been doing one-on-one coaching work since 2010, and having my master's in clinical psychology and being in the field of clinical psychology has taught me so much about what it means to do one-on-one work that's transformative. So in order to launch this amazing offering into the world, I'm going to be doing a 3-part series here on the podcast. I haven't decided on the official name yet, but it's basically going to be like the myths of the coaching industry, or like the biggest mistakes that coaches can make, how to prevent burnout with one-on-one coaching, and how to go deeper with clients in the way that allows them to integrate that depth. Those are the different topics that I'm going to be sharing. I haven't come up with a title yet, but that's going to be here on the podcast soon. So you don't have to do anything. Just know that that is coming. Really excited about it. And I'm already accepting applicants for this program. So if the idea of mentoring with me sounds at all appealing, you can actually go to taisky.com/mentorship and learn more about this offering. But more info will also be coming your way in the coming weeks. Okay, so I talked about the ebook, talked about this new offering. Let's get into the conversation with Kaitlin June. Okay, let me read to you Kaitlin's bio. Kaitlin June goes by she, they, and she is the queer, gospel-loving, sassy Southern song catcher here to help you sing your soul. It is their deep honor to support and empower public speakers, ceremonial facilitators, and visionary musicians embody their voices and empower their audiences through sacred vocal work. As a 5-time Scorpio, Kaitlin brings just the right mix of fun, focused play, and deep illuminating fire to their path as a voice doula and artivist. As a ceremonial theater creatrix and prayer former, they are committed to singing in an interconnected culture rooted in joy and justice. So you can learn more about Kaitlin at KaitlinJune.com, and you can follow them on Instagram at The Voice Doula. Kaitlin also offers some really cool things in the episode. Everything that Kaitlin offers is in the show notes. As you're thinking, as you're listening to this conversation, maybe think about your own relationship with music, with your voice, with singing, with self-expression. What is your relationship with singing? Do you let yourself sing? Why or why not? What does it mean for you to sing? Do you find joy in it? When have you been told, if you don't like to sing, that you are not a good singer? Because I think every kid loves to sing. And so if we don't like to sing, it's probably because we've been shamed for it. We also talk about religion, and that is a whole Pandora's box that we can explore on what is your relationship with religion and church and God. What does it mean for you to be connected to a religion, to church, to God? And, where do you feel like there could be a fortification in your relationship with yourself through a higher power? I'll leave it at that. Let's get into the interview. Okay. Hello, Kaitlin. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I want to give a big shout out to our mutual friend, Luna Love, who recommended you for Reclaim. I was not familiar with your work until Luna reached out and said, like, you have to have Kaitlin on your podcast. And anytime Luna makes any types of those declarative statements, it's like, I mean, who am I to even question?
Right.
But then I did get a chance to look through your website and your presence, and I'm just so excited to be having this conversation with you. It's unique to Reclaim, and I think it's a conversation that's not unique to the lived experiences of many of us. And so I'm really excited for the opportunity to have this conversation with you. So thanks, Luna, for the connection. And Kaitlin, why don't we start off by you sharing just a little bit about you and about your history?
Oh gosh, there's many roads we could go down. What in particular would be great for the listeners? What do you think, knowing then what they would like to know?
Well, I'm curious how you I'm curious for you to share, just explain like a little bit about what you do.
Yes.
And specifically, what in your lived experience really drove you to do what you do now?
Thank you. Perfect. Yes. I am a voice doula. So that term, sometimes people like look at me with a little cocked eyebrow, like say, huh? What does that mean? Like, I'm not a coach, I don't say I'm a teacher. I was a birth doula for many years and have always been a singer-songwriter, and found in the birth room a lot of metaphorical connection to the process of learning how to sing. And, I will say that I'm not equating them. I'm not saying they're the same thing. Like, being in labor with an actual human being is a very different experience. But a lot of the tools that I learned and was able to bring into a birth room, I began utilizing in my very first sessions that I did with some friends who just asked. I had 3 people ask me in 1 week, I think back in like 2014, like, do you teach voice? They'd seen me perform. And I was like, I know. I mean, I had a lot of training. I did a lot of musical theater and stuff growing up, but I had never taught myself. But I thought, what if, I could just do it my own way and not do all the music theory and stuff that I was taught. Like, what would it look like? What is the holistic practice? Because it's always been a very, very private, spiritual kind of journey for me. And really listening to what sounds true, what is true with my voice and my song. And yeah, my first couple of clients, they gifted me that term. They're like, it's like you're a voice doula. And I was like, whoa. I remember just feeling very resonant with the terminology and, geeking out about the correlation with the vocal cords in the cervix and two ends of the same spectrum, and how in the birth room it's encouraged, to encourage dilation to go further, to make low sounds. Because when you make low sounds, your vocal cords are further apart. So if you're encouraging something spreading and going left and right, doing that on one end can help provide an example for the lower end. So for the cervix, oh, okay, that's what's going on up here. Let me echo that. So yeah, I could talk about this for a long time, obviously.
But I never thought of it that way. I think that right there, the connection that you made just speaks to me about how our body is so wise in all of its connection, and how much wisdom there is in the body, how much we can learn from the body, and how miraculous this body is, that it is that two very different parts of our body can be connected in this way.
Yeah. And that they're not that different,
right.
That some of the makeup of the tissues and things are very similar. And if you just Google image search the vocal cords, it looks like a vulva and it looks like the cervix. Like there's such an amazing correlation that you can literally see it. So I just became really fascinated with all of that and began a private practice, and it just took off in the first year, really skyrocketed. I felt that it's really just about listening. Like, quote unquote, teaching someone to sing is way more about listening than it is about, okay, try this technique, try this. I saw in myself that my process of finding my own voice as a musician and as an artist really came through a big process of unlearning a lot of what I was taught when I was in school for musical theater, when I was taking private voice lessons and singing way higher than what my body actually wanted to sing. So that unlearning process was something that I, just began guiding other people through. And it's so beautiful to witness someone peel their own onion layers back. And I think that's so much of what, being a doula is just providing that space. Right. And witnessing and be like, I know this is hella uncomfortable, but I am with you through it.
Right. So, yeah. Well, and I can see such a metaphor of what you're talking about in terms of the greater accessing of our voice.
Yes.
Right? And unlearning cultural narratives about what it means to take up space and self-express and use our voice. So I run a program called Worthy Women Rise, and the initial concept of Worthy Women Rise was all about self-expression, because that was something I was really learning at the time. Now it's shifted. It's self-expression, but in the context of worthiness. But at the time, it was called Own Your Spotlight. Was my first kind of program, and I did a 3-day masterclass, and I had a vocal coach come in and teach everybody how to activate their voice. And they would look at me like, why is a vocal coach here? Like, I'm not here to sing, and I can speak just fine. And she taught them the concept of resonance and using your voice within your body and the power of that. And I feel like it was like a divine intervention that I met her and I brought her into the program. But that's why I felt so resonant with your work, is because I have definitively seen in my own self-expression that understanding the power of our voice, whether or not it's for singing, is singing, I think, like, is a great part of it, but it doesn't have to just be for singing in order for us to access that power within our bodies.
Yes. Amen. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I really see, I work with public speakers a lot, and people who are very used to facilitating big groups and, presenting things in front of hundreds of people. And I have found that if there is even a slight hesitation in their system to sing, then there is a massive amount of untapped power for their offering and for their work, because that essentially at the root of it is shame.
Right.
And if that exists in one part of their voice, and that's the thing. It's not a binary thing. It's not like, oh, singing is over here and speaking is over here, like left and right. It's all tied into the same thing. So if there is any sense of shame or hiding in one part of the voice, it is definitely affecting the other part.
Yeah.
And I worked with a particular public speaker who I just adore and love, a very good friend of mine, who had a big reawakening in herself, a big remembrance. And so across the board, when I've worked with women and people socialized as women, there was always a point, especially around when they were like 8 or 9 or around teenage, where someone along the line said that they were too loud or that they didn't sound good, and that shut down. And 99% of the time I see this, and that the cells in our bodies remember that. And it creates an energetic template. And so much of what has come off of that, even if it's subconscious, is based off of that. So it's like, all right, let's go in, let's rework some of that. Let's let that express. And then it's like, oh, a whole new world.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I have a handful of repetitive dreams. And one of those dreams is that I used to teach yoga. So in this repetitive dream, I'm teaching yoga in different contexts, different arenas, different places. And no matter how loud I am, nobody can hear me.
Yeah.
And it every time I wake up from that dream, I feel I can feel in my body the frustration that I feel in my dream. That no matter how much I scream, no matter how much I yell, no matter how confident I am in my body, no matter how much I'm attempting, everything else is too loud.
Yes.
And I love that you made that connection with shame, and that for most of us, it was being told that we're too loud, or we also use, I think, in our culture, this idea of vocal fry, the way that we speak is not, people don't like to hear it. And so it's so valid that so many of us struggle with then using our voice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, we've been told that this is not okay, and that we should do this and this. And they're like, there's all these different options and different input from the outside of quote unquote what we should sound like. Right. And I've just seen that be so incredibly damaging. And the ripple effect is massive. I mean, it affects how we show up in our relationships, how we show up for social change, how we show up in movement spaces. And that's why I feel so passionate about vocal work in particular. Because addressing it at the root, going, into the root. I have seen in my own life and the people that I've worked with, that the amount of service that can come through going through that process, the ripple effect as it moves out, is just a night and day difference. It's huge.
Yeah. I love this. It's so funny because, I love to joke that I love to sing. I love singing. I have no problem singing, but nobody wants to hear my singing. It's not a pleasant sound. You know what I mean? It's not it's not a trained voice. So it's really interesting how, I think the desire that we all have to sing, to dance, to express, to take up space is so embedded in all of us. Yeah. And then by being told over and over and over again, we don't want to hear that. Or, children are to be seen, not heard, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
We become smaller and smaller, and we believe that we shouldn't take up that space.
Right. I see it so much. And I had a thought train on that. Just a moment. Yeah, I really see it as our responsibility. There's no amount of external validation that will help an individual who's not willing to look at the layers within themselves. Someone can be the best singer in the world and they could hear, oh my God, I love your voice a million times. But if they are struggling with their own relationship with their voice, it doesn't matter. It's not going to matter. They're not going to feel any better. They can get those rushes of a high, like, oh, so, you know, okay, thanks. And like 10 seconds of a high. But what it really comes down to being unapologetic with yourself, with enjoying how you sound yourself, not giving a shit about what other people think. And that is a process. That is a journey. It's one that I'm continually on as well. But what I've seen is that when that level of unapologeticness comes into play with the voice, it comes out everywhere else.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I am me. I like what I like. I sound what I sound like. Some days it's this, some days it's that. And the accepting that things change. This is something that I work with folks on a lot, is that it is such a patriarchal, white, toxic, white thing to think that our voices and our ranges are stagnant. Even with singers, they're like, oh, I can go from a D up to a F sharp. I'm like, maybe today you can, but like they're not set in stone ever. And they fluctuate with astrology. They fluctuate with parts of one's hormonal cycle. They fluctuate with where you are emotionally, with the lands that you may be standing upon. And I think that they're way more dynamic and multidimensional than what we've been taught, most of us growing up. So it's like, yeah, the cultivating that relationship and getting used to your own sound and being, you know, I heard you mention a moment ago that like, no one wants to hear me sing. Like what I would ask you is like, do you want to hear you sing? You know, like, are you cool with how you sound? And not just cool, but like loving it and being like, yes, I love this. So, yeah.
Excuse me. Like speaking of voice, something's coming through for me clearly.
It happens.
Well, I want to transition this conversation to another realm of your work that I think is so brilliant and powerful, which is the spiritual, religious element of voice and the connection between the two. And I wonder how those two got connected for you.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I'm like, where do I even start? Well, I will say that I grew up in rural North Carolina, in the rural South, and was very blessed to grow up on a farm that had a lot of space. And I would go out into the woods by myself as a little kid and just make up songs with what I called my imaginary friends. That was my term. And now I'm like, oh, my guides and my ancestors, like my team members. I didn't have that terminology then. But I would just sing and make up these little songs. And it's where I felt connected to something. And, you know, growing up, my grandma wanted me to go to church with her. And I never liked it. I never felt connected to it. It was very stiff and kind of stale. And like, we're supposed to be prim and proper and wear our nice clothes. And the singing, I felt just very dry. I didn't feel that connection that I felt when I was out in the woods by myself. But as a high schooler, I was invited to be part of a gospel choir that a substitute teacher at my school thought that I would like to be a part of. Like, who knows? Like this, to me, you know, the word God resonates with me. I understand if it doesn't resonate with everybody. I know there's many good reasons for that, but I see that as definitely the hand of God, that for whatever reason, she saw something in me and she invited me to come to this gospel choir rehearsal of her church. And I just remember feeling this immense sense of joy and elation and light and connection. And I was the only white person in the room. And I didn't have, you know, I didn't know about it. I just knew that there was something about this music that touched me so deeply that I would cry my eyes out, but feel like I was on top of the world at the same time. So that's kind of where it began coming together, was that first real moment of singing gospel with other people. And it was a whole journey from there. I kept following that thread. I'm still following that thread. There's been many years of means as a white person. The music, it comes from a lineage of slavery. That's where the roots of gospel come from. And, how do I reckon with that as a white person? How do I approach this with awareness and sensitivity, and also, honor the lineage and still sing it at the same time? It's like there were many years when I decided to be quiet about loving it because I didn't think it was okay. I was doing a lot of reading about white fragility and appropriation, and like really clammed up and not wanting to be that white person that was doing something wrong. And I feel very blessed for the mentors that I had at that time and are still in my life, who are like, this is part of your path. Your soul chose white this time, and your soul chose gospel, and there's a reason for that. So it continues to be the biggest teacher of my life. And there's a lot more I can say on that, but it's a guiding light, and one that I'm continually a humble student of. I try to be a humble student of. Yes.
Well, and I know that a lot of people, have really complex relationships with religion and what it means to be a part of the institution of religion. And I'm going to speak, I think, predominantly about the Christian religion, because that is what, the United States comprises of, and my own personal lived experiences with the Christian religion. But, how do you support people, or what are your thoughts around, when people share with you the innumerable limitations of the teaching? It's not the teachings that are limited, right? It's the interpretation of the teachings. But those interpretations are then what people act upon, and what creates, the intent, the homophobia, all of the, you know what I'm trying to say.
I'm with you. I hear you. Yes, I'm like, ooh. It's a similar kind of process as doula. At first, I think of a very pivotal step is just being heard on it. That I personally feel excited about, people developing their own relationship with God, just as you develop your own relationship with your own voice. But first, there needs to be a process of grieving and being real with what happened, and releasing anger and releasing some of the trauma, whatever that looks like. So I'd say that that's a really pivotal first step, is just to have an assessment of, the hurt and the harm that maybe has been done. But not for the sake of staying there and dwelling in it, like for the sake of it being able to release, like honoring it, and then moving forward, choosing to move forward, choosing to get curious about, what if I defined church for myself? What if I defined God for myself? What if I could be a church unto myself, that my body is its own kind of church or temple? And that's something that I really try to live by myself, is like, all right, what, the church I attend here in Oakland, California, City of Refuge, we say we are a ministry of restoration and radically inclusive. So regardless of race, color, ancestry, sexual or sexual orientation, ability, age, and I've never really practiced what they preach in terms of inclusion as much as this church. And was founded by a group of Black lesbian pastors almost 30 years ago who knew that there was more possible. I want to just give a big love to Bishop Yvette Flunder, who's our presiding bishop, who knew that especially for queer and trans Black folks, that a lot of the UCC churches would say that they were welcoming, but there wasn't this real rooted sense of welcome, regardless of the things that a lot of Christianity says are bad, being gay, being queer, being this, being that. So I just use that church as an example of what is possible. And that it's just unlike any community I've ever seen. And just as a template to invite people to be like, okay, what would that look like for you? Like, what does your radical inclusion look like in your life? What would your church look like? What songs would you want to sing in your church? And getting creative with it, because if I know anything, the Holy Spirit is creative, and they like to speak in all kinds of ways. So just tending to that relationship and seeing, just as it is with the voice, it is a relationship. It's a lifelong relationship that we get to tend and have choice in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember growing up, my mother practiced a very open faith, and her desire for me was that I find God, and she would
Yeah.
joke that like, once you find God, I can die,
Oh.
joking. I think. No. And so it was interesting because I grew up after moments of connecting with Christianity. Most of my teens was very angsty and very atheist, from a place of lots of anger and repelling against God, because at the time I theorized, like, how could God exist if so much bad things happen to the
Yeah.
world?
Yeah.
Now I understand that angst to be as how can God exist when I'm feeling so hurt?
Mm.
Right. It was
Mm-hmm.
about my own wounding that I was unable to see at the time. And the book that changed that for me, and it's kind of like, oh, I'm such a white woman, but the book that changed that for me was Marianne Williamson's. The name is even escaping me. What is her?
I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, it was Marianne Williamson's book, and she talked about God in a way that was very different than how I had ever related to the understanding of God before. And that opened up, oh, okay, maybe
Yeah.
it's not, maybe my relationship with God is a space of exploration. The places in which I push the concept away is saying something about where I'm at and who I am and how I'm processing and dealing. And the way I bring God in is also how, and the relationship to God itself is such a cool platform of
Yes.
exploration of our relationship with authority, our relationship with our caregivers, our relationship with
Yes.
other, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. Amen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it sounds
I
like that has been your journey for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that it will continue to be. I say that first and foremost, God is my partner. They're my lifelong partner. So I'm interested in being in as healthy and as loving of a partnership as I possibly can. I wouldn't be partners with someone who was all patriarchal and this and heteronormative and that and racist, all these things that so many people associate with the Christian church and with God. Because that's what has been fed. That's what has been the dominant narrative. And I think it takes courage and it takes a lot of intentionality to be like, you know what if it could be different? And to trust and have faith that there are other people on a similar journey, that it's not, it's almost like an undercurrent, but it's becoming much more of the upper current, and I'm seeing it happen, and it's so refreshing and it's so exciting to see more folks step in. And like I made a video a couple weeks ago about coming out of the closet, about loving God, that's the new coming out of the closet.
Why do you think that is?
I think there's a lot of judgment associated with it. I, for instance, would not qualify my music for a long time as Christian music, because I was like, oh, people are going to judge that. Like, people are going to think like, oh, she's a Jesus freak or blah, 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 blah. And I didn't want to be associated with so many of the things that the Christian church have done that's been harmful. And I was like, wait, if I am not being true to what is coming through me in music and in spirit and what I know my relationship to God to be, then I am perpetuating that narrative. If I'm not actively doing something to say, hey, it doesn't have to be that way, then in some way I'm aiding in the perpetuation of it. And that's when I realized that. I was like, I'm not okay with that. So I was like, yes, I do identify as Christian. I do identify as spiritual. I like the word God, and I'm going to write music about it. And I want to share it with people who are gonna feel something. And I know that's a big audience for my music, is people who have had church hurt and who be like, oh, okay, well, Kaitlin is, they, queer person who, in a lot of, especially in the South, like may not be accepted at some churches, but it's like, no, like making our own church. Like, I like who I like kinky stuff. I'm into all kinds of things that a lot of churches would probably not be okay with, but that a lot of the congregation and the people are secretly. So it's like, okay, where are we still closeted? Where has the church closeted people? And how can we love all of ourselves and our kinky parts and our queer parts, and see that that is equally as much God as everything else. So let's love that too. I feel excited.
I love it. I love it. You know, it's interesting as you're talking, I'm remembering a conversation I recently had with a participant from Worthy Women Rise who participated a few years ago. And it was like a catching up and hearing about how that group is doing since we stopped working together. And she shared how she had been part of the church as a child and then felt the need to leave that community and leave the church. And it was after doing her own inner work.
Yes.
That she was now able to come back to the church and have a relationship with church, spirituality, God, that felt like it included her whole being. And I love that for her. And the reason why I love that is because I think what she's naming is that the church, spirituality, but so many other portals can be used for our detriment if we're in that unhealed space.
Exactly.
Right? I know self-development can be tremendously harmful. You know, I know that there's so many kind of vehicles that if we don't have the tools to drive it, is just another vehicle for our shame. And so the fact that, you know, she needed to have that separation, and not everyone needs that, but she needed to have that separation to be like, okay, let me define who I am. And now I can, in my wholeness, come back to this relationship in a way that feels really meaningful to me.
Oh, thank you. I love that story. Yeah. It's like, it feels related to that external validation that we were mentioning earlier about voice. Like, you can be in the church and know that something's kind of off and have all this stuff fed to you and talk about God. But if you haven't had that exploration within you, it's not going to land. It's not going to mean nearly as, not going to mean nearly as much. So it's like, and that's exactly why I see vocal work and exactly what you're talking about here being so linked and so connected, because it's like that journey of self-discovery, that journey of, okay, you know, how do I know myself? Like, from my perspective, like, our souls are our voices. They're very inextricably linked, and we are instruments. Like, source, spirit, creator, God, whatever word feels most resonant for the listeners right now, like, has a unique assignment for each one of us here to do. And they speak through what I see is the energetic experience of like our radio signal, our antenna, and the you know, inspiration in spirit, the breath that coming through, that the wind through our souls is the voice of God. And when we say yes to that and can get out of our own way, then there's clarity of what our own voices are and what our mission, what our purpose is, how we can be of service here. So I think that, you know, developing the relationship with the voice and developing a spiritual relationship, you know, and in my practice, this is what people come to find out. They're like, oh, I thought this was just going to be voice lessons. I'm like, no, this is getting to know your spirit. This is getting to know your soul, and like what your particular radio station is with God. And it makes everything more fun. That's the thing. Like, I get that it can be so scary. It's terrifying, especially if there's been, you know, trauma around the voice, but it's like the whole point of diving into it is to make life easier. Because that the flow that can happen from that, the relaxation that occurs when you know your own self and your own bones like so deeply, is like, that's when shit gets really fun.
Yeah. And maybe that's the whole point.
Yes. I dare say yes.
Right. You know, it's interesting. I found my own connection with song and spirituality through the kirtan, you know, and I was exposed to it from my mother at a very early age. And when you're in that space, when that sound is reverberating in your soul, it is a high like nothing else. I mean, it
Yeah,
feels like, and your body, you can't help but move, and you're dancing and you're screaming, dancing, singing, and you're just like, so, I mean, there is,
exactly.
to me, when I've had those experiences, it's just this total yes. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
is the whole point.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the whole point. Not to keep chasing that high. The whole point
Right.
is in the experience of knowing that that is within us, you know?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And like my perspective is that when more people know that, the world, I mean, the world is changing already, but like the more that people know that, the more the world is going to change for the better. And
Right.
it's, you know, it can offer kind of a sense of elation and a sense of a high, but I'm like, what if that was more of the norm? Because really
Right.
what that is us getting out of our own ways. That is that sense of connection. I was like, oh, okay, now I need to go back to stressing out about this. Or like, you know, once kirtan's over, or for me, like once my gospel choir rehearsal is over and I go home, it's like, what's my window of tolerance for feeling good? You know, like what's my window of tolerance for remaining open and being like, oh, wow, it's an option to have that signal and that dial still tuned to that as much as possible, because that's where
Yeah.
brilliant ideas come in. That's how, and you know, from what I believe, our ancestors speak to us, our guides speak to us, and calling on their support, asking like, okay, what is y'all's consensus of what I'm here to do? What are today's steps? How can I honor you? How can I honor the assignment I've been given in this life in a way that's going to be helpful?
Yeah.
So yes, more singing,
Yes.
everybody, everywhere, please, please, especially during quarantine, please.
Well, I was just going to ask, how do you
Yeah.
feel like all of this kind of has come together for you during this time of this global pandemic?
Yeah, it's been very hard. It's been, you know, simultaneously devastating and also like a big learning journey. I moved to Oakland, California from North Carolina, from where I'm from, to be in two choirs. I felt such a strong call in my spirit because it had been years since I'd been in choirs. And I really sat with myself a couple winters ago and I thought, what is the hunger? What is this gnawing feeling that like, what am I wanting? And it didn't
Mm,
take long to hear that I miss being in a choir, like singing with other
mm,
people. So I knew about Thrive Choir that's out here. Um, we're getting ready to release our first EP. Keep the eye out for that. And the church I mentioned earlier, City of Refuge, they have an incredible choir and praise ensemble. And I literally just moved out here to be in those choirs. And I love the community. There's, you know, many great things about the Bay Area. I love seeing the way that art and especially music and activism flow together out here. So when, you know, back in March, when our rehearsals got shifted to Zoom, there was part of me that felt a little pissed off. I was just, I didn't
yeah.
move out here to be on Zoom. Like, you know, I was taking it personally, but we really have persevered in the ways that we can. And of course, I miss singing with everybody in person. There's nothing like that feeling. And I trust and have faith that we will again at the right time. Um, but for me personally, what I've done is begin a weekly online class called Remember Your Voice that meets on Fridays. That is just and yes, it is on Zoom, but it's a way to come together. And it is folks from all over the place. We had somebody from Austria the other week, just getting together and singing. And it's in
Mm,
mainly original songs or songs that I say God wrote and I wrote them down, songs that I have received, and just to keep the spirit alive, to remember that it is an option to sing, and not like, oh well, I'll sing like once a month. Like, nah, sing as much as you can. It's an option. You're allowed to, and you're allowed to have fun. And just exactly as you mentioned, like the way that it lifts the spirit, like I think that's a priority and a responsibility right now. All the heaviness that's going on, like there has to be some kind of um, antidote or the other end of the spectrum. And I see it's almost like a secret that people have that they love singing. I've seen this a lot. It's kind of like, oh, let's another coming out of the closet. Like, oh, I love to sing. I'm like,
mm-hmm.
great, let's be open about that. Like, come on. Um,
Right.
so that is one way that I've done it. And just for myself, I wake up singing. That's just kind of how. how it's
Well, I think it's just such an important message that you're offering, that we get to find joy right now. We get to have fun. We get to find spirit. We get to connect
Absolutely.
with play. Sing. I joke that like you can't be upset when you're skipping. And it's like not to use skipping to spiritually, but to bypass the hard emotions. But I think sometimes we forget that things can be fun.
Exactly.
And that even the spiritual work that can be heavy, the healing work can be heavy, working through closeted stuff and shame. I mean, all that stuff can be hard. And it also gets to be tremendously liberatory and joyful and connecting, and allows us to experience the full spectrum of the human experience, which means not just the hard stuff, but also the really joyful stuff.
Exactly. That levity. Thank you so much for saying that. I so wholeheartedly agree. And that levity is so important for longevity.
Yeah.
It's like, if we're going to be doing this for a while, like, I think I stated this earlier, it's not only an option, but our responsibility. Like, and to prioritize joy, to prioritize fun, because that's going to give us staying power. And to me, like that, to me, that's one of the big gifts and teachings of gospel music. That when it is life or death, when it is down to the wire, when it is unbelievable circumstances, that there can be a choice to surrender and to have faith in something greater.
Yeah.
And I'm not equating slavery with what's happening right now. I'm not saying they're the same thing, but I'm saying that gospel music provides a template for us to learn from, in a way that we can bring fun and joy when shit is really hard, and still clap and still harmonize with one another. And the power of resilience that offers is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's something that I continue to want to learn from, and provide spaces and cultivate spaces where that's the deal, because we're going to have so much more, again, like, ability to show up with our full selves for the hard shit if we can, like, have those moments of joy.
I love that.
We're here for all of it.
Yeah. Well, any final messages, comments, something that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure that we speak on?
Oh, gracious. I don't know. I just feel very blessed to be here.
Yeah. This has been wonderful.
Yeah. I'm like, we could talk forever about all of this kind of stuff. But I would love to, just let people know that if you all want to check out the weekly class, Remember Your Voice, there's more info on my site about that. We meet on Fridays. It's such a fun community, such a diverse community, in so many ways. And just really all the stuff that we've been talking about here is prayed into and funneled there. And I have a gift for the listeners. I have a playlist that just kind of crafted itself through me, that are songs that give me a lot of faith. And some of them come from the gospel tradition. Some of them come from more contemporary Christian. And what I invite with folks listening, if there is hesitation or like, oh, I don't know, for me, I really appreciate a non-binary approach to God. Like, when songs say he this, he that, I'm like, like, I can get a little turned off. So, in my music, I address God as they. But again, it's that I can come with a choice. I can be like, okay, I could hear that and get super pissed off about it. Or I could do a translation. And the more that translation is practiced, the easier it gets. So I'm like, okay, they're saying he in the song. I'm going to insert they, and then I can really get into it and enjoy it. So that's what I'll invite for folks who want to listen to that playlist. And there's some gorgeous, gorgeous harmonies and things to sing along with. And my intention is that it can provide some upliftment and maybe some inspiration to even sing a little bit. So,
I love it. Well, I'll make sure to link all of those things in the show notes for people who want to check it out.
Great. Thank you.
So thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing your love for this. I mean, I can feel it from all the way over here on the other side of the screen. I mean, this is clearly so wrapped up with your joy and your identity and your power and your purpose. And it was such a gift to get to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, ditto. I feel the same way. So grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Jinx. Thank you for listening to Reclaim the Podcast. This podcast represents the opinions of Thais Sky and her guests to the show. The content of this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental disorder.